Some people say harm only comes from strangers. I learned the hard way that's not true. The man who caused the deepest cut in my life once sat at my dinner table, called me family, and still found a way to take what was mine. It started with small demands, then louder ones, until one day he crossed a line I couldn't ignore. If you've lived through something like that, share your story below. Ethan told me to make the store run as if it were nothing. Christmas morning, the temperature sat far below freezing, yet he stood in the kitchen doorway and spoke like I worked for him. "Pick up the things I texted. Claire and I don't have time to deal with delays," he said. I grabbed my coat without answering. Arguing in front of my daughter never ended well, so leaving seemed easier than letting another fight start. The drive from Maple Grove to the small grocery near Elm Creek took longer than I expected. Roads had a thin, dangerous sheen, but there was no point mentioning it when my phone buzzed in my pocket before I even reached the entrance. "Why is this taking so long?" Ethan snapped the moment I answered. I told him I'd just arrived. "Unbelievable. One list, one errand," he muttered and hung up. The store felt crowded carts rolling in every direction. I moved, quickly grabbed what he wanted, and headed back out. Another vibration hit before I crossed the doorway. I let it go to voicemail. The tone in his earlier call already lingered enough. Halfway through the parking lot, a horn blared. A dark SUV skidded sideways and slammed into me before I could move. Pain tore through my side and the ground came hard. Snow clung to my clothes. Something warm spread under my jacket. My phone lit up beside my hand, still ringing. A woman from the store yelled for help as another person reached for my shoulder. "Sir, don't move. An ambulance is coming." Her voice sounded steady, practiced. She didn't ask many questions, just signaled for others to keep space. The ringing didn't stop. When I finally slid my thumb across the screen, Ethan's voice burst out. "Are you ignoring me now? I told you to get back here. How long does it take to buy a few things?" Words scraped through the speaker. No pause, no concern. "I swear if you're pulling some stunt, don't. Claire's stressed enough. Just get home, and don't make a scene." The woman beside me frowned. "Do you need me to call a family member?" I shook my head, fingers closing around the phone. "No, someone's already calling," I said, though it wasn't true. Ethan kept talking until the call cut off. I didn't answer again when he tried a second time. The paramedics arrived, lifted me onto a stretcher, checked my breathing, asked about dizziness. None of them asked who kept calling, and I didn't tell them. Holding the phone felt like holding a reminder of everything I'd let slide for too long. The soreness along my ribs eased a little by the end of the week, though the bruises stayed dark. Moving around the house demanded slow steps. Neither Ethan nor Claire asked much about the accident. They behaved as if nothing unusual had happened, and that told me more than any apology could. Gathering my things didn't take long. A few shirts, some tools, the binder of financial papers I kept locked in a drawer. Claire passed me in the hallway, pausing with a look that drifted past me rather than settling. "Do you need help with anything?" Her voice tried for steady, but something in it wavered. "No, I've got it," I said. She nodded and walked toward the living room. No mention of the SUV, no question about follow-up appointments. Ethan sat on the couch with his feet up, scrolling through his phone. He didn't look up when I entered the room to grab my boots. "So you're heading out again?" he asked. "For a bit." He smirked, eyes still on the screen. "Might be better if you stayed somewhere else for a while. This place is crowded and you need rest. Selling the house would solve half the problem, you know. Everyone would be more comfortable." The comment slid out so casually it almost sounded reasonable. Almost. Claire stood near the stairs, arms folded, gaze lowered. "Ethan," she murmured. He waved her off. "I'm just being practical." No argument felt worth the effort. My jacket hung by the door, and the moment my hand touched it, a pressure lifted from my chest. The only words I gave him were, "I'll be back for the rest soon." Ethan shrugged. "Just don't drag this out." Stepping outside felt like stepping into a different life. The cold bit through the fabric, but the space helped me breathe. The truck started on the second try, and the drive to Bloomington gave me time to think about what I'd ignored for too long. Marcus opened his door before I even finished knocking. His expression tightened the second he scanned my face. "What happened?" "Nothing new," I said. "Your ribs say otherwise. Come in." Sitting at his kitchen table, I told him about the parking lot, the calls, the way Ethan reacted afterward. The words came slow at first, then steadier once I realized he wasn't going to interrupt. When I finished, he leaned back and folded his arms. "You want to keep taking this, or you want it to stop?" "I don't want to fight," I replied. "That's not what I asked." He stood, grabbed his phone, and searched through his contacts. "You're talking to a lawyer tomorrow. She handles family disputes and elder issues. I'll drive you." My phone buzzed. A message from Ethan appeared. "You leaving without telling Claire is messed up. She's upset. Fix it." Another text followed from Claire, "Dad. Can we talk later? I don't know what's going on. I just want everyone calm." The hesitation in her words carried more weight than the sentences themselves. She was torn, pulled in two directions, trying to keep peace while ignoring what it cost her. Marcus watched me read the messages. "He's working her," he said. "He always has. I don't want her caught in this. She already is." He left the room for a moment. When he returned, he held a small flash drive. "This came from your front porch camera. You probably haven't checked the recordings in months." Plugging it into his laptop, he opened a folder labeled with dates. A clip loaded immediately. Ethan stood on my porch yelling at someone on the phone. He threw a package against the doorframe hard enough to make a dull crack. The recording showed him pacing, cursing, hitting the railing with the heel of his hand. Marcus didn't comment. He didn't need to. Watching the footage, a part of me clenched that I'd tried so long to excuse what I'd seen in smaller doses. Claire's voice message buzzed through. "Right then, Dad, please don't just disappear. Ethan's upset. I'm trying to understand both sides. Call me when you can." Marcus folded the laptop and placed it in front of me. "You can stay here tonight. Think things through. No pressure. But that guy isn't just rude. He's dangerous in ways you've been downplaying." My hands rested on the table, the faint ache in my ribs pulsing with each breath. The recording replayed in my mind even after the screen went dark. Marcus started heating water on the stove, moving around as if hosting me had become second nature. Downtown traffic moved slowly that morning, giving me too much time to think. Marcus drove while I read over the notes I'd scribbled the night before. Listing events in order made everything look harsher. The pages created a line of decisions I'd tolerated for years without realizing where they were leading. Paige Morales' office sat on the 7th floor of an old brick building. She greeted us with a firm handshake and a look that told me she'd seen every kind of family trouble. Once we settled in her meeting room, she opened a legal pad and waited. "Start from the beginning," she said. So I did. As the story unfolded, she interrupted only to ask for dates, names of accounts, or places where Ethan had stepped into matters he had no business touching. "Did he ever use a card tied to your bank?" "Yes. I let him have a secondary card for emergencies." "Did he ever sign anything on your behalf?" "He handled a few repair bills, nothing significant." "Did he ever pressure you to assign financial authority?" "He mentioned it, said it would make things easier for Claire." "And did you sign anything related to that?" "Not that I know of." She paused and adjusted her glasses. "We'll need statements from your bank. I want to see all activity from the last year." A strange heaviness settled in my stomach. Hearing the questions laid out like that forced me to confront how often I'd brushed off warnings. Every time I excused Ethan's behavior as stress or immaturity felt foolish now. Paige pulled up a property record on her laptop, while Marcus watched from across the table. "This is your house, correct?" she asked. "Yes, bought it in '89. And this address," she turned the screen slightly, "is not the one listed for tax correspondence. The zip code wasn't mine. I never changed that. Someone submitted a request 2 months ago. It might have been processed through the county portal. Access requires a name and partial ID numbers." Marcus leaned forward. "You think Ethan did that?" Paige didn't answer right away. "I can't assume anything, but redirecting a homeowner's mail opens a window for financial manipulation. Under Minnesota law, that's a red flag for elder exploitation." That phrase hit harder than I expected. Elder exploitation. The kind of thing you hear in workshops or news clips, not something attached to your own life. Maybe he misunderstood what he was filing, I offered. "He's careless with paperwork. It doesn't mean he was trying to take anything." Paige closed the laptop gently. "I understand wanting to give someone the benefit of the doubt, but intent doesn't erase harm. You've described a pattern of control, and this change of address fits the pattern. The law doesn't ignore patterns." The room felt warm, suddenly, the air too still. Not due to her tone, she spoke evenly, but because every answer pulled me closer to a truth I'd tried to avoid. "Claire doesn't know any of this," I said. "She doesn't have to know everything right away," Paige replied. "But if we move forward, she'll be part of the process whether she wants to or not." My phone vibrated then. Claire's name flashed on the screen. I answered, hoping for something simple. "Dad, Ethan said you took documents from the house. What's going on?" Her words shook slightly. "I brought my papers with me. They were mine to begin with. Ethan says they belong to both households. He's upset. He thinks you're trying to create trouble. You know those documents are tied to my accounts." "I don't know what to think," she whispered. There was no good way to respond without pulling her further into the conflict, so I kept my tone level. "We'll talk later. Take care of yourself." "Please, don't let this get worse," she said before the call ended. Paige exhaled slowly. "That's the pressure talking," she said. "This situation often pushes adult children into corners." Marcus nodded. "Ethan's feeding her whatever suits him." Paige stood and gathered the papers I'd brought. "I'm filing for a temporary protection order on your finances, but before that we need you to make a formal report. Minneapolis PD has a dedicated unit for these cases. You should go today." The thought of putting everything on record made me uneasy. Reporting my own son-in-law felt like stepping across a line I couldn't step back from. Marcus saw the hesitation. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. "I'll drive." Paige handed me a folder. "These are copies of what we'll submit. Keep them with you." We thanked her and left. The meeting had lasted less than 2 hours, yet the weight of it stretched far beyond that. By the time we reached the parking ramp, the folder felt heavier than it should have, not due to paper, but consequence. Marcus and I had barely driven 2 blocks when my phone rang again. The bank's fraud department asked if I'd requested access to my savings account through a new email. "No, I didn't authorize anything," I said. The representative hesitated. "Someone attempted to reset your login. The verification code was sent to an address we don't have on file for you. We've locked the account until you confirm your identity in person." A pulse tightened behind my eyes. Marcus glanced over. "Ethan." I don't know who else it would be. He didn't comment. He didn't need to. I knew the pattern too well by then. Ethan pushed boundaries until he found one that gave him leverage. This time he had gone after something he thought I wouldn't notice. We headed straight to the Minneapolis police station. Filing a report sounded simple, but standing at that counter forced me to speak out loud what I'd tried to minimize. The officer asked direct questions. Who attempted the access? A man named Ethan McConnell, my son-in-law. Any prior incidents? I handed over the folder Page prepared. Yes, several. He scanned the pages, his expression firming when he reached the section detailing the address change and the history of financial use. You're doing the right thing by reporting this, he said. We'll document it and pass it to our financial crimes unit. While he typed, my phone buzzed again, 3 missed calls from Claire, then a voicemail. Her voice shook so intensely that listening to the message felt like standing in the middle of 2 people pulling me in opposite directions. Dad, Ethan says you're trying to file something against us. He thinks you're trying to force us out. What are you doing? Why would you go after your own family? The officer continued typing as I replayed her words. Marcus stepped closer. She sounds scared, he said. She believes whatever he's telling her. Another message came through, this time text. Dad, is this really about pushing us out of the house? Just tell me the truth. That hit harder than anything Ethan had said in months. The idea that my own daughter thought I wanted to evict her left me struggling for breath. I typed a reply, erased it, tried again. Erased it once more. Nothing looked right. Nothing would reach her through the wall Ethan had built. When the officer finished, he slid a copy of the report toward me. Keep this with you. If you get more attempts to access your accounts, notify us immediately. We stepped back into the hallway. Marcus put a hand on my shoulder. You're protecting yourself. Don't apologize for it. Before I could answer, an email from Page arrived. The subject line read, Urgent motion filed. I opened it expecting something procedural. Instead, the first paragraph hollowed me out. Ethan had filed for temporary occupancy rights to my home. His claim stated that I lacked the mental capacity to manage my finances due to my age and the impact of recent medical trauma. The filing argued that Claire and Ethan needed legal authority to oversee the property for safety reasons. He had flipped the story, and he had done it fast. A strange mix of anger and disbelief crawled up my throat. He's saying I'm incompetent, I said. Marcus read over my shoulder, jaw tightening. That's more than nerve. That's strategy. He's trying to get ahead of the report you just filed. Page called a moment later. Robert, I need you in my office right now. Do not respond to Ethan or Claire. Do not engage. Just come here. We drove to her building. She met us at the conference table, already sorting documents into organized stacks. This, she said, placing the motion in front of me, is a very aggressive move. He's trying to establish himself as the responsible party and paint you as unstable. If this stands, he could gain control of the house temporarily. The papers looked neat, official, and deeply wrong. Ethan had provided fabricated statements, partial emails taken out of context, and even an affidavit claiming I had memory issues. He'd used the accident to argue I wasn't capable of independent decision-making. Most of this is nonsense, I said, flipping through the pages. Nonsense becomes dangerous when submitted to a court, Page replied. We have to respond immediately. I'll file a counter-motion, but I need your full cooperation. My phone buzzed again on the table. Another message from Claire. Dad, please stop. Ethan says you're attacking us. I don't know what you're planning. Are you really trying to take the house back? I didn't open it further. Couldn't. The words stood there, as if someone had carved them into the screen. Page tapped her pen lightly. We move now or he gets ahead of us. The judge will review this within 48 hours. I need your decision. Page spread the documents across her desk, each sheet forming another piece of Ethan's attempt to rewrite my life. Statements from neighbors claimed I wandered at odd hours, repeated questions, forgot conversations. None of it was true. "These are coordinated," Paige said. "He didn't gather these casually." Reading the lines left a sting I hadn't expected. Being called difficult or old-fashioned was one thing. Being labeled confused and unstable was another. I pushed the papers back toward her. "He's trying to bury me under nonsense," I said. Paige tapped her pen lightly. "That means we respond with facts." Marcus stood near the door with his arms crossed. "You saw how he worked the neighbors," he said. "He knows how to manipulate people." The more I studied the pages, the more it felt like someone had dragged the worst version of me onto the table and insisted it was the truth. Some part of me wondered how Claire interpreted all this. She grew up seeing me steady, reliable, rarely raising my voice. Now she was being handed a picture that didn't belong to me, but looked real on paper. Paige slid another stack forward. "This is our response draft. You'll need medical verification that you're fully competent, and we'll attach the evidence Marcus found." Marcus lifted a small drive from his pocket. "The backdoor camera picked up something from last month," he said. "You should see it." Paige plugged it in and opened the file. The footage showed Ethan entering my room while I was out. He opened drawers, dug through my files, snapped photos with his phone, then put everything back as if nothing happened. Watching it felt worse than hearing any accusation. The violation hit in a way I couldn't describe. Paige didn't look away. "This is damning. It proves intent. He wasn't just sloppy, he was searching for something specific." A dull pressure built behind my ribs again. Not from the injury, but from the realization that Ethan had planned this long before the holiday morning he sent me out into the storm. "He's been preparing this," I muttered. "Yes," Paige replied, "and he's counting on you backing down." The next step meant seeing my doctor. We drove straight to the clinic. The physician who treated me after the accident reviewed the new paperwork and gave a slow, thoughtful nod. "You want something confirming cognitive capacity?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He performed a brief evaluation and then wrote additional notes. "You're sharp as ever," he said. "But I'm adding that you're experiencing prolonged stress. Anyone would in your situation." That last line hit deeper than expected. Stress wasn't the word I would have chosen, but it fit. Too well, maybe. Back in Marcus's truck, I tried calling Claire. The phone rang until it stopped. I tried again later. Same result. A text finally appeared, short and brittle. "Ethan said you're cutting us off. I don't know what's true anymore." Another message followed. "He wants me to sign a statement about your health. Says we should protect you before something worse happens." My thumb hovered over the keypad, unsure how to reply. Whatever I wrote would be filtered through Ethan before she read it fully. He controlled her phone decisions the same way he tried to control mine. Marcus watched me struggle with the screen. "He's isolating her from you," he said. "I know," I answered. The worst part wasn't Ethan's lies. It was watching Claire doubt her own instincts. She used to call me every time something felt off in her life. Now she couldn't even pick up the phone. Paige called in the late afternoon. "I have updates," she said. Marcus turned toward her office without waiting for me to speak. She met us with another envelope in hand. The court accepted his motion for review. The judge set an emergency hearing. You need to appear on January 1st. A date that carried its own weight. The start of a year usually brought small hopes, new habits, fresh intentions. Now it carried a deadline for defending my own home. Paige handed me the formal notice. "We'll present evidence, medical reports, and the recordings. However, you must stay focused. Do not engage with Ethan no matter what he says. He'll try to provoke you." Her words sat uncomfortably in my chest. Ethan had already twisted every action, every silence, every attempt I made to keep peace. The more I tried to steady things for Claire's sake, the more he used those efforts against me. Page continued, "This hearing determines temporary control of the property. If he wins, he could remove you from your own home while the investigation continues." That possibility landed harder than I expected. Losing the house wasn't just losing walls or rooms. It was losing decades, birthdays, dinners, the years after my wife passed, every nail I hammered, every repair I'd done myself. The thought of Ethan walking those halls as if he owned them made something cold settle under my ribs. "We won't let it get that far," Marcus said. Page nodded. "Preparation is key. We work together and stay ahead." She organized the papers into a folder and placed it in front of me. "Take this. Review only what you can handle tonight. We finalize the response tomorrow morning." I gathered the documents slowly, careful not to crease them. Marcus opened the door for me as we stepped into the hallway, leaving Paige to pack up for the night. Paige met us in the driveway with a printed copy of the court order, her breath steady as she greeted the officer assigned to supervise the inspection. "Let's keep this procedural," she said. "No arguing, no side conversations." The front door opened before we even reached the steps. Ethan stood there, arms spread, as if welcoming a guest he didn't want. "What is this supposed to be?" he asked. The officer held up his badge and the order. "Routine verification, sir. Court mandated." Ethan's shoulders tightened. Then he forced a wounded tone. "Verification for what he's the one causing trouble," he said, pointing at me. "He's been threatening us, showing up without warning. My wife is scared." Claire hovered behind him, hands clasped at her waist. She didn't look scared. She looked exhausted. Her eyes flicked toward me for a second, then back to the floor. Stepping through the doorway felt strange, like walking into a version of my life I didn't recognize. Furniture had shifted. My old bookshelf was missing half the items I kept for decades. A framed photo of my wife, normally placed near the stairs, had vanished completely. Paige noticed my gaze, but didn't comment. "Officer, we'll start with the shared areas. Then the bedrooms." Ethan jumped in quickly. "You don't need to go through everything. We have nothing to hide." The officer replied in an even voice, "We'll follow procedure." Moving from room to room, the changes became sharper. A handmade clock my father gave me decades ago was gone. The file cabinet in my room had been emptied of several folders. Nothing dramatic, but enough to feel like pieces of me had been removed. A tightness pulled at my throat. Not because of the objects themselves, but because someone went through my things without any respect. Years of memories reduced to leverage. Ethan kept close to Claire, tightening his grip on her arm every time Paige asked a question. "Tell him, Claire," he whispered loudly. "Your dad is twisting everything to push us out." She swallowed hard voice, barely above a murmur. "I don't know what's happening." Paige stepped forward. "Officer, I have something to show you before we move on." She reached into her folder, pulled out a small drive, and plugged it into her tablet. The officer reviewed the clip first. His eyebrows rose. "I need to see that again," he said. Ethan took a step forward. "What is that?" "Evidence," Paige answered. The officer replayed the footage, Ethan entering my room, digging through drawers, pulling out documents, photographing them, then returning everything as if nothing happened. Claire's breath hitched as she watched. "Ethan, what is this?" He snapped toward her. "That's edited, obviously. He's trying to frame me." Marcus, standing near the doorway, muttered, "Hard to edit a time-stamped porch camera feed." Ethan ignored him and pointed at the officer. "Don't fall for this. He's setting us up. He probably planted that camera." A laugh slipped out of Marcus, not mocking, just disbelieving. "The camera's been there since his wife passed. It's been there longer than your marriage. Claire's focus drifted between the screen and Ethan's face. Something cracked in her expression. Not a full break, but the beginning of one. Ethan pressed on. He's making me look dangerous. He wants the house for himself. He's always resented that Claire and I live here. My jaw tightened, but I kept my voice level. I never resented either of you. Ethan barked a harsh laugh. Oh, please, you've been planning this. Filing reports, dragging the police into it, telling people I'm stealing from you. You're the one threatening our family. The officer intervened. Sir, enough. We'll finish the inspection before addressing any further claims. Claire's knees wobbled slightly. Paige guided her to a chair with a gentle hand. You don't have to speak right now, Paige said. Ethan stepped toward her. Claire, don't listen to them. Your dad is twisting things. He's sick and he's lashing out. Think about who supports you. She didn't answer. Her eyes drifted to the floor, then to the empty space where the clock used to hang, then back to the tablet, still showing Ethan's actions. The officer cleared his throat. We need to continue in the living room. Everyone, please move there. Ethan threw his arms up dramatically. This is harassment. I'm calling my attorney. You're welcome to, Paige said, but the hearing stands. We filed toward the living room. Paige in front, the officer after her, Claire following slowly, and Ethan storming behind us like someone preparing for a fight he couldn't avoid. My steps felt heavy, not from pain, but from the gravity of being asked to defend my place in the home I built. Nothing about the moment felt triumphant, only necessary. The officer stopped near the coffee table, pulled out a form from his folder, and looked around the room. Let's sit down, he said. We need to go through each point of the order before we proceed any further. His voice settled over the space, and every person in the room braced in their own way. Paige moved to the center of the living room and placed her folder on the table. Officer, we'll proceed with the evidence, she said. He nodded and pulled out his notebook. Ethan paced behind the couch, muttering to himself, casting glances toward Claire as if waiting for her to defend him. Paige began with the financial statements. She slid copies across the table, each marked with highlighted sections. These show repeated attempts to access Mr. Hale's accounts without authorization, she explained. The officer scanned them, eyebrows rising slightly. Ethan scoffed. Anyone could have requested those resets. He messed up his own login. Paige didn't react. She simply reached for the next set. Here are the transactions made with the secondary credit card Mr. Hale provided. Several charges were made at electronics stores, bars, and auto shops, none of which Mr. Hale visited. Ethan stepped forward. I bought those things for the house. Or for Claire. You're twisting everything. Claire's face tightened, though she stayed silent. Paige continued stacking one document over another. Property filings show a submitted request to change the mailing address for tax notices. Mr. Hale did not authorize this. The request came from an IP address associated with this residence. Ethan's voice spiked. That doesn't mean anything. He probably forgot. He forgets lots of things lately. Paige paused, then reached for a small device. I also have audio evidence recovered from Mr. Hale's voicemail. My breath slowed as she pressed play. Ethan's voice poured into the room, raw, sharp, and unmistakable. Where the hell are you? I told you one thing. One thing, you make everything harder, you hear me? Don't start your drama today. Just get home and don't make a mess of this family again. Hearing it again, hearing the contempt, sent a cold rush through me. My hand clenched at my side nails, digging into the skin of my palm. Paige glanced my way. Mr. Hale, can you confirm the voices on this recording? Yes, I said, keeping my tone steady. That's him, and that's the call he made while I was lying on the ground after the accident. Claire covered her mouth. Her shoulders trembled. Ethan lunged toward the table. "This is ridiculous. He's exaggerating that entire day. He barely got hurt. You think I'd talk like that if he hadn't been stirring up problems?" The officer raised a hand. "Step back, sir." Paige didn't stop. She opened the final folder. Now the video footage from the back entrance. This was provided voluntarily by Mr. Reed. The officer leaned closer as she played the clip. Ethan appeared on the screen again, entering my room, rifling through drawers, pocketing papers, taking photos. No explanation could soften the clarity of what we were seeing. Claire's voice cracked. "Ethan, why were you going through Dad's things?" He spun toward her. "I was checking for paperwork. He misplaces things I was trying to help." She shook her head slowly. "You told me he lost those documents months ago." Ethan stammered for a response, but found none. The officer straightened, took out a form, and read aloud. "Based on the evidence provided, financial irregularities, unauthorized property filings, documented harassment, and potential exploitation of a vulnerable adult, the court authorizes temporary removal of Mr. McConnell from the premises pending further investigation." Ethan froze. "What, you're removing me from my own home?" "It's not your home," the officer replied. "You're required to vacate immediately." He turned to Claire, panic flashing in his eyes. "Claire, come on. You're not going to let them do this. Tell them your dad is confused. Tell them this is all being twisted." She stepped back. Then another step. Her gaze no longer held confusion, only clarity, grim and painful. "I can't go with you," she whispered. He reached out, but she recoiled. "You said you were protecting us," she said. "But you were only protecting yourself." Ethan's anger snapped into something desperate. "So that's it? You're choosing him after everything I've done?" Claire didn't respond. Her silence was answer enough. The officer gestured towards the doorway. "Sir, you need to gather your immediate belongings and leave now." Ethan's voice collapsed into a guttural growl. "This isn't over, Robert." I didn't move. Didn't answer. Watching him spew those words felt like watching a storm finally run out of energy. He stormed down the hall, grabbed a few items, and pushed past the officer on his way out. The door slammed behind him, leaving the house still for the first time in months. Claire stood there trembling. Tears welled and finally spilled down her face. She covered her eyes with the back of her hand, as if embarrassed by her own reaction. Paige touched my arm gently. "Let's sit down for a moment," she said. "You need to sign the officer's report, but we can take a short break if you'd like." Claire waited near the edge of the parking lot, arms wrapped around herself as people streamed out of the courthouse behind us. She glanced up when I approached, but didn't move closer right away. "Dad, can we talk for a second?" I nodded, and she took a shaky breath. "I don't know where to start," she said. I kept believing what he told me because it was easier than thinking he'd actually hurt us. I let him turn me against you. I should have seen it. No apology, no dramatic collapse, just plain honesty. That more than anything told me she finally stepped out of his shadow. "We all choose who we trust," I said. "And we live with those choices. That's true for me too." "I don't expect you to forgive any of it," she murmured. "I just want to fix what I can." She rubbed her thumb along the spine of the folder she held the same court documents delivered minutes earlier. The judge's ruling had been straightforward. I retained full ownership of the Maple Grove house. Ethan was issued a no-contact order for the duration of the investigation. Claire was granted immediate standing to file for divorce and report the financial manipulation if she decided to. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't break down. "I need some time away from everything," she said. "I found a small apartment in St. Paul. It's nothing special, but it's mine. I'll stay there until things settle." "That sounds reasonable," I answered. "Build what you need. You're allowed to start over." She exhaled, shoulders lowering. He lost his job this morning, she added. His manager called after hearing about the restraining order. He didn't take it well. Claire stepped forward and placed her hand on my arm. I'll keep my distance for a bit. Not because of you, because I need to hear my own voice again. That's fair, I said. You know where I am when you're ready. She nodded, then turned toward her car, pausing once, as if wanting to say more. Instead, she unlocked the door, slipped inside, and drove away at a slow, careful pace. The next week settled into something steadier than I expected. The house felt unfamiliar at first, as if its walls needed to relearn my presence. I fixed the back gate, cleared the shed, repaired the steps leading to the porch. Routine brought order. Ordinary tasks pulled me back into myself. Renting out a small section of the property helped cover repairs I'd postponed for years. The new tenant, a retired music teacher, kept mostly to himself and didn't mind the spare layout. He thanked me more in the first week than Ethan had in the entire time he lived there. Paige checked in periodically, short calls, direct updates. Investigation is ongoing, she'd say. No action needed from you unless I request it. Her steadiness made the legal process less suffocating. By early spring, Claire sent a brief message starting the divorce paperwork. I'll be okay. Nothing more. It was enough. Ethan never contacted either of us again. Word reached me through Marcus that he'd left Minneapolis altogether. No forwarding address, no voicemail, just absence. Some people drop out of their messes rather than face them. He was one of those. I settled more fully into the rhythms of my own life. One afternoon, while reorganizing part of the basement, I found a stack of old community newsletters my wife used to collect. The senior center in St. Paul had long been a place she admired, but never joined. Remembering that stayed with me. A month later, I volunteered there, not for charity, but for perspective. The director invited me to speak during a session about financial safety for older adults. I didn't share every detail of what happened, just enough to help others understand the patterns, subtle requests, slow shifts in control, the danger of staying silent too long. Telling the story didn't feel like revenge. It felt like placing something heavy on a table and walking around it to see it clearly. One of the staff members reminded me of a quote often used in grief counseling, "What you name you can face." It stayed with me. The day of my third session, I arrived early. The building buzzed with the usual mix of conversation and staff moving chairs around. I stepped toward the break room to refill a cup of water. My reflection in the small metal dispenser looked older than it had a year ago, but steadier. The volunteer coordinator waved at me from across the hall. "Robert, we're ready when you are," she said. "Give me just a second," I replied. The cup warmed between my hands as I paused near the entrance to the community room. Conversations drifted on the other side of the door, familiar voices, waiting faces, people trying to make sense of their own histories. I took one more breath, adjusted the papers in my folder, and reached for the handle.